for sure. Um, this movie has a lot of transportation of very large animals. What is the strangest or largest animal that you have transported?
That's a great question. A camel, I think. A camel.
Ah,
Being with
oh,
the camel and transporting the camel is a camel's big.
thanks so much for joining me today. I've got Josh Zeman talking about Checkpoint Zoo, which comes to theaters on August 15th, 2025. It is a fascinating documentary about about the conflict in Ukraine, but told from a very different perspective. It's kind of one of the most unique stories about the war I think you'll see, but it has a lot of animals, some heartbreak, some drama, some violence, and a ton of actual heart. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it was kind of a fascinating story, and it did give you a different angle on this war that is going to have so many stories, so many human interest pieces. It gives you kind of a very unique perspective into that conflict. So I'm very excited to talk to you about this movie, and thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, David.
Of course. So we talked first about years ago about Sons of Sam. This movie, has a different type of animal, maybe a nicer animal, a happier animal, but still, a fascinating film. I guess the first question, like, how did you find this story? How did this, story come across your desk? It just seems such an interesting area.
Well, I, like many journalists or filmmakers, was interested in the war. And I think war is such a fascinating mystery, human mystery, if you will, the human condition. So it's something that I've obviously always wanted to explore. But when I read what happened was I saw an article on the front page of the New York Times about a chimpanzee named Chi Chi. Chi Chi had escaped from a zoo in Kharkiv, the Kharkiv Zoo, but it was only staying there temporarily. Chi Chi had actually come from another zoo on the outskirts of Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, only 30 miles from the Russian border. It had come from Ecopark Feldman Ecopark, and that zoo had been bombed terribly. And so they had evacuated these animals out, including Chi Chi. And Chi Chi had escaped and was wandering through the middle of Freedom Square, which is right in the center of Kharkiv. And it was just so apparent, almost. Here you have a chimp looking for its freedom. The Ukrainian people, this was about 4 months into the war. The Ukrainian people are looking for their freedom from oppression and bombing. But it was something else. There was video, actually. And as the video panned across, you saw all these people of Kharkiv, these Ukrainians, and they were smiling. And these are people who didn't know if they were going to live from one day to the next. They had been bombed terribly. They were their countries in the middle of imploding from an invasion from Russia, but yet this animal was making them smile for that one moment. And that's why I said, okay, it's not just the subtext, but it's also the emotion. It's and so literally the next day I typed in Feldman, Eco Park Feldman, and I called the number on Google and I said, hey, my name's Josh Zeman, I'm a filmmaker. And they're like, I don't understand any English and I don't understand the Ukrainian. They called me back the next day and there was a gentleman there. His name's Vadim, who you see in the film. He's one of the only ones that speaks in English. And he said, would you like me to send clip that went viral? And I said, yes, please. And he sent me this one clip of Timothy, who's one of the volunteers, these four young boys. And it's Timothy doing a selfie while he's driving a Sprinter van. And he's saying, oh, it's the 3-month anniversary. And then he pans the phone over and you see a van full of kangaroos. And it was the cutest, most enjoyable thing I've ever seen. It's like cat video extraordinaire. And I said, Vadim, do you have any more? He says, yes. Would you like me to send you more videos that went viral? And I was like, please. And so every night he would send me footage that they had shot, whether it was him and his team or videos that the boys had done of themselves, selfies. And from that, it was like a detective story, just kind of putting these puzzle pieces together. I didn't really know the full story, but you could see it in the footage. Oh, there's it was not in any order, it was coming from all these different sources. And so that was kind of fun as from a filmmaking standpoint to reconstruct this story from a deconstructed sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that kind of like you didn't even really know what it was, but something about this video, something about this story just kind of spoke to you and made you smile in a time when I think a lot of us were not smiling, given the situation. Like, and I was curious, how, was this filmed? Did you like jump on the ground early, or was this like filmed while they were there and then you reconstructed? That's really interesting that they kind of like had the force. Either, maybe it's just the youth these days, or these people just knew this was an interesting story that they were filming this as it was happening, as the war was happening, as they were kind of coming up with these plans. They were independently filming this, knowing that either they want to preserve this or someone will find this interesting someday down the line.
It was two things, I think. Number one, well, when we were putting the film together, there was no footage of the original, like month and a half, 2 months, almost no footage, very little. And the minute these four boys come and start to volunteer, the minute these kids get in, suddenly there is like selfies, all these videos. And they were just, and I was like, yep, and they were literally just like shooting themselves like every day. I think these kids were just like, oh, wow, that's a lion. That's cool. Go stand in front of the lion. All right, cool. All right. Now shoot a video of me like driving the lion away. Okay, cool. And so suddenly the film just opens up when these boys come and they started filming. At the same time, I think this was a zoo, that was functioning. So it had a PR department. And so they were also filming, but I think as adults, they had a different, perception of what it means to be filming an event. It had more of a purpose. And so they were filming to try and, I think, tell their story, but also I think they were worried, like, what are we going to do? Like, we may need help. So a lot of the footage that I would get, I would say, Vadim, I have 12,000 30-second clips. Why is everything 30 seconds? And he said, TikTok is 30 seconds. No? I said, oh my God. Do I have 12,000 30-second clips? Is this film literally going to be one long montage of the whole thing? Which was kind of fine in some respects, because if you can imagine, like you see those videos of people disentangling whales, and the whale turns around and like says thank you, for lack of a
Yep.
better understanding,
Yep.
where you pull the plastic pail off the raccoon's head and the raccoon says thank you. It's like 10,000 of those videos watching these people rescue these animals. So it's great stuff, but it's just, okay, we're going to have to make a story out of this. And how do we construct that story? Thankfully, there were other journalists who were going in and filming. That was actually some of the more terrifying moments in the film. And then I ended up going pretty shortly after that, like 2 months later, after I kind of found what I had. And I said, okay, I'm going to go over there with just a cinematographer and get their first reactions.
Yeah. No, I'm actually kind of curious to see what the like hour and a half checkpoint zoo only of 30-second viral clips would be. Like that would be very experimental. Like you would win different documentary awards for that one, but I'm kind of
Totally,
curious to
totally.
know.
5 instructions.
So yeah, next question was going to be, when did you actually go out there, or did you actually go out there? It sounds like you
Mm-hmm.
did fairly close after, just to kind of like both film the reactions, also probably just so you yourself could experience it and see kind of what this was like to help tell the story. What was that
Yeah,
experience like?
yeah. I've never been in war before, so that was quite interesting. I had done some other pretty hardcore shoots, like I spent a year in Humboldt County filming weed dealers, but war is quite a different thing. It was hot when we went in there. It was hot, like border crossings and checkpoints and explosions and all those things going down. Um, it was also about a month after they had finished, maybe a month and a half, 45 days after they had finished the last day of their evacuation. So it was all so fresh. And I think because the war was still going on, they had not processed the evacuation and what happens at the end of the evacuation. I, before I went over there, as a filmmaker, you always have like, okay, well, how am I going to tell this story? Like, what's the quick 2 minute story that I was looking at, or what's the comp, right? What's your comparison? I said, this is like a Mission Impossible story. These folks are trying to take out 4,750 animals in a kind of no man's land with missiles falling and mortars falling under the noses of the Russians. It's like a PO, like the 1980s Vietnam POW stories of Chuck Norris,
Yep.
or the Where Eagles Dare 19, because everybody kept saying this is like a World War II style war, right? So we're like, oh, we're making Where Eagles Dare. We're making, you know, all those stories, or we're making Inglorious Bastards. That's what we're making. And so
Yeah,
in this,
that's a good one.
in terms of these 1970s Mission Impossible films. And so that was a really good thing to go over and like kind of say, like, let's make this story like that. And then what we found is that our characters were all just those archetypal characters. Like you had the big boss, or you had the one woman who curses like a sailor, or the brainiac guy, or the gentle giant, or the four kids, the young four kids who you think are going to get killed right off the bat because they're so young and naive, you know. So it was interesting. When I went there, I didn't speak any Ukrainian, and I hadn't done an English language film before. And I sat down and we started talking. So it was very raw when I was speaking to them, and I didn't. They hadn't processed anything, and so I would, because I had never done an English language, foreign language film, I would just ask the interpreter behind me the question. He would ask them, and then I realized it would take too long for me to get the answer, for him to translate the answer, and I would lose the emotion of what they were saying. So literally, I would ask the question, I would look into their eyes without knowing what they were saying, and I would try and read it all in the micro expressions of their faces, how they were answering. And if they cried, or if I saw that they got into it, I would just look and I say, did we get it? And he's like, I think we did. This was to the translator. I was like, next question. Like there was it could have totally failed, but it ended up working.
Yeah, you just have to kind of trust your gut and trust the human aspect of this, the human experience that we all have, or well, that they have, and you can
That
kind of
they had.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, and knowing that they were processing what they were processing in that moment.
Yeah. So I'm curious, some of this footage is kind of, after the fact reflections. Were those the reflections that you went out to film, or was there additional time that you spent processing it and then going back and getting some additional
I went back
interviews
as
with them?
Yeah, I think the first time it was for me to know what the actual story was, because I thought I got it from the footage, and then we would have conversations. But it was like, oh, well, the story's kind of not exactly that. So it was for me to go over and figure out what the story was, and I was only there, Kharkiv. Like I had been on a 2 week trip, but I was only in Kharkiv for 5 days, 4 days, because it takes so long to get there. You have to go into Russia, you have to go across. I mean, you have to go into Warsaw, you have to go across. So I went and I got what I thought the story was. Then I came back, I matched that story to the footage that I had. I cut something, almost like a rough cut. And it's like, okay, now we got to go back for like 2 weeks and really get into the full stories and do some maybe soft recreations or show some animals in some 60-second frames so we could kind of fill in the gaps. But a lot of times, really more than anything, we ended up just really playing with the footage that we had gotten off the cell phones and slowing it down or speeding that up, or using recannibalizing that footage in a way that maybe it wasn't 100% intended, but because it's all war and you're looking at animals, it works in so many different ways. And that's kind of what I love about filmmaking.
Yeah, and that's also like, the rawest, most close in time footage. So, you want to make sure to stay close to the source material for that.
Of course, absolutely.
So, one thing I was wondering about, this film takes place about, the first, like, I think 4 months of the conflict. I don't think any of us expected the conflict to be going on this long. Are you still in contact with these people, or how are they doing? Like the amount of destruction that happened in just those 4 months is insane. And then to think that it's been going for 3 years at this point, like I can't even imagine what their lives are like.
It's interesting. I've become more understanding of the Putin's long game to wear them down. When I went over there the first time, I couldn't believe that there were, like, they call them pensioners buildings, basically buildings where they put all the old people, and they had been decimated with rockets, and they were shooting just tanks. They were shooting tank fire into these buildings. I was like, oh my God, like that's war crimes, like full on. And so it was one thing to see it then. But then when I went back the second time, this was after they had pushed all the Ukrainians, that big route where they pushed all the Russians back across, and they had like almost re-liberated Kharkiv, and everybody was smiling, and it was a summer, and flowers were growing, and everybody was so patriotic, and it felt like they were going to win. And now when I speak to them, and I speak to them all the time, it's back to step one again. He's bombing blocks and blocks of people, missiles raining from the sky. I'll tell you, I was never scared when I went over there. When I got scared was when I came back, because I had stayed in this one hotel that was where all these journalists were staying, and it was filled with documentary filmmakers from Brooklyn. It wasn't really, but I like to think it was filled with documentary filmmakers from Brooklyn. There was one Brooklyn doc filmmaker there, and it was like, this is like years of living dangerously. Like, this is awesome. Like, we're here in this place. When I got home about a month later, that hotel had been specifically destroyed.
Jeez.
Specifically. And I was like, holy shit. It's not like, hey, I'm American, don't touch me, or else it's going to be some international incident. Like, no, 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 no. They will shoot you because they don't want you to tell your story to the rest of the American people. And that is when I got scared.
Yeah, that does kind of put a target on your back and kind of makes the gravity of the situation much more, a very different calculus for you. That is a scary story. I'm glad that it happened when you were not there, but I can imagine, I'm sure there were lives that were lost when that attack did happen.
Absolutely. I saw people who I had interacted with talking about the film, or coffee, or it was terrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I know we have limited time. I'm going to switch to, I just call it lightning round. They're just lightweight questions about the film. Given the subject matter of this film, I'll try to keep it as lightweight as I can, but you can feel free to skip any of them, but I try to keep them very answerable. First question, this film is about, a zoo and a person who loves animals. Are you an animal person?
Not to the extent that they are. I think that I think that's important. The film is not about preaching to the choir. The film is about trying to understand groups of interesting people. What I've learned, though, you don't have to be an animal person to realize how saving animals saves us as human beings.
Yeah, very well put. Speaking of animals, what is your favorite animal if you have one?
I think that would be the tarpir.
Oh, that's awesome. You play it all the way in. I love it.
I went
Full
full
commitment
on.
to your craft. Um, when was the last time that you were at a zoo? Was it the last time you were at this park?
Yeah, I haven't been back to a zoo yet. I still love zoos. It's hard for me to reconcile the two issues. I now understand them more as a civilian who's not in this battle versus zoos versus not zoos. I think the point of the film is to not preach to the choir, but to discuss with the unindoctrinated.
Yeah, for sure. Um, this movie has a lot of transportation of very large animals. What is the strangest or largest animal that you have transported?
That's a great question. A camel, I think. A camel.
Ah,
Being with
oh,
the camel and transporting the camel's big. Camel's a big beast.
and they smell too, don't they smell?
Oh, they smell and they piss, and they spit, but they're just so interesting, and they have a long neck, so it's you're not that you can't escape really when you're in a vehicle.
No, that's a great story. Another like fun, hopefully, story from your time there. And the last question, you are opening your own park, Zeman Ecopark. What animal would you have as the showcase? Would it be a tiger? Would it be some other animal that you would want to have in your mythical zoo?
Oh my God. Well, my first answer was going to be I don't know if I'd open an eco park, to be honest with you. Now, I don't know that I would. I would like to go out to like safaris, and show animals in the wild. What animal would that be? Tarsier for sure. I'd like to hang out with a family of tarsiers.
All right. Well, that is a future goal for sure. I love that. I love that you'd rather have like a sanctuary essentially.
Yeah, we should be in the cages and we should go out into the wild and then come back.
Yeah, that's fair. I think humans are the most dangerous animals in that entire zoo. So, and so the film is finally coming to theaters. It's been on the festival circuit for a while. It's finally coming to
Hmm.
theaters August 15, 2025. You are out promoting the film, getting the word out. But after people see Checkpoint Zoo, what can they look next for you? What story are you looking to tell? Do you have anything brewing in there?
Always working, jumping back and forth between crime and animal stories. I think, really, I'll be honest, the most important thing is for people to see this film. It's a lot harder these days to get people to get out to the theaters, and it's a lot harder these days to have people see good films. Just because you make a good film doesn't mean everybody's going to have the ability to see it. So, really, just trying to promote, make sure that people go to checkpointzoo.com, make sure they come out this weekend to New York to see the film when it opens up at the quad, make sure that they come out going to LA on the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th to see the film, Miami the following week, Chicago. And of course, if the film isn't playing near you, you can go to checkpointzoo.com and request a screening. We now have there's a lot of interesting technology with regards to how people can screen films and get films beamed to their local theater. So we're using gather technology, and I think that's interesting as well.
That's awesome. All good options. Yeah, if you can see it in theaters, go see it in theaters. Otherwise, request to see it, but you should definitely check out this story. It is fascinating. It is definitely kind of a different angle on the war than I think we've all seen. And it's just a very human story involving a lot of animals. So this is the director, Joshua Zeman. Thank you so much for your time.